Hello and welcome to Making Through the Seasons. My name is Lauren. In this video, I'm gonna share with you all the things I got up to making in the month of July. And you can find me on Ravelry as LaurensMakes and over on Instagram as Making Through the Seasons there as well. I live in New England with my husband and our 2 young children. And this month I have a few different finished products to share with you, or finished objects. I'm gonna actually start with the knitting, and it's mostly knitting and sewing. So I'll start with the knitting part and then move to the sewing part at the end of the episode, so you can kind of pick and choose what you're here for. The first thing that I finished this month is a pair of socks for my son. I shared these last month. I had just cast them on, and they're a real basic vanilla sock with just some ribbing at the top. The yarn is Shirsty Cat in the Just Sock colorway, and the color is Karma, and I think they came out really cute. I am not a huge fan of the type of feel that this has. It feels really soft, and I'm sure that a lot of people will love how soft it feels. For my son, I think it's okay because his feet grow so quickly that these aren't going to be socks that he'll be wearing for more than 1, maybe 2 years. If it was for a pair of socks for myself, I would be a little bit cautious just because it's so soft. I don't know how durable they'll be. So we'll have to see how these go in terms of how he wears them and if they make it all the way through his foot growing out of it or not. So those are the first ones. And I knit these on 2.25 millimeter needle, and they were 56 stitches around. The next thing that I finished this month is the Scrappy quilt socks. This is a pattern by Kay Jones of the Bakery Bears, and I finished these, I started these rather in May when the pattern came out. I knit them on 2.25 millimeter needles again, and I chose to do a 3-stripe repeat. I still have a couple ends to weave in. They're not quite done. They're just, the knitting part is done. So this is a tweed yarn, and I'll link all the yarns in the information below. This is a Cascade Heritage yarn, and then this one I believe is called Cloud Fibers, and it's got these fun little pops of color. So I finished these. These socks came all over the place with us this year. They went camping at the beach, they came to England, and then I finally finished them up when we got home from our recent trip. So I love them. They're really squishy. I just, the only thing I don't love about them is how many ends I have to weave in. I carried the gray because it's striped. Every other stripe is a gray stripe. I carried that yarn, the gray yarn behind it. So that's slightly less ends to weave in, but there are still a ton of ends. So there's 2 for every purple, white color that you get there. So a lot of ends to weave in, but they're really pretty socks. And then next, I had been going through one of my crafting storage bins, and I had a bunch of unfinished projects that had sort of gotten put away, and I knew I had a pair of socks in there, the original pair of socks that had used this Cascade Heritage, and so I took those out, and I had completed the first sock already, and so this sort of gave me the motivation to go ahead and finish the second sock, and so I was able to finish that this month. I found that from the time in which I put the sock away, so I think I probably knit it last summer, but it's possible it was even longer ago than that. In the time in which I put it away, my knitting has changed slightly, and it's a much tighter gauge. So the second sock, this is the second sock, and this is the first sock, and there is a good difference in the in the overall gauge of the sock, as well as the length of the sock. So in the first sock, I only had to do a tiny little bit of pink at the end to finish it off. So I kept the number of rows the same in both socks, but when I got to the end of the second sock, it wasn't going to be as long as the first sock, and so it was substantially shorter. And so what I did is I just knit a whole longer section of pink at the toe of this. And so they're not exactly identical twins. There's the difference in the toes, and also one sock fits much more snug than the other one. I think overall I like my the tight gauge that I get on my socks today versus where I was 1 or 2 years ago. I just find that they stay and hold your foot in a nicer way. And so I definitely have a preference to that, but not enough of a preference to reknit the first sock. So I'm happy to call these done. I think they're really fun. So the purple is a Cascade Heritage, and then I think every single one of these is a pair of socks that I knit at some point in the dim and distant past. So I think that I can't remember the names of the yarn manufacturers, but if I think of any or I can find them historically in my Ravelry, I'll link them below. With Ravelry, when my kids were really little, I wasn't very good about going in there and adding all of my projects, so I don't know how many of these I'll really have projects for. I am getting a little bit better about that and trying every month or every few weeks to go in and to add all of my new projects. So my Ravelry for the current projects is much closer to being true and accurate than it was for, let's say, the 5 or so years, maybe 6 years prior. So those are my 3 FOs. And I don't think I have any other finished objects, but I do have some newly cast on projects. And the next project that I have is a sweater that I've just cast on, sort of not cast on. Well, let's start from the beginning. While I was looking in the closet for the sock in which I knit half of the pair, I stumbled upon a sweater that I had almost the whole sweater. The whole body was knit, and then I was most of the way done with one of the arms, and it was the Whitmore sweater by Amy Loden. And I started this back in 2021 with some somewhat precious yarn that I had purchased at Rhinebeck. So Rhinebeck falls right around my birthday every year. It's within a few days of my birthday most years. And a few years ago, I had bought a sweater's worth of yarn as like a birthday present to myself. And I think that we were trying to figure this out, and I think it's either from 2016 or 2017, so it's a long time ago. And I had waited a few years, and I finally thought that I found the pattern for it, and I started the Whitmore sweater back in 2021. And I had knit most of the sweater and it stalled. And honestly, I could tell that it wasn't the right texture. It wasn't the right drape for that sweater. The sweater calls for, I believe, 2 yarns to be held together to equal sort of a worsted weight yarn. And I was using a worsted to almost Aran weight yarn to knit the sweater. And the texture, the effect, the drape, it wasn't sparking joy, and that's where it sort of stalled for me, is that I knew that I wasn't gonna like the way the sweater sat on me because it was almost stiff from being knit at too tight of a gauge. And so I decided that what I was gonna do is I was going to completely frog this sweater. And it's not something that I do very often, a lot of times I'll sort of power through and finish a sweater that I don't really wanna wear, even though I know that I'm not gonna wear it, or other times it'll stall and sit unfinished in a bin for the rest of my life. But this one, I decided, because the yarn was so precious to me, it was this birthday present, I was going to repurpose it. So I actually have some footage, I'll put it at the end. I frogged the entire sweater, and then I used my Nitty Noddy from spinning and I skeined it all back up, and then I soaked all of it again, and I washed it just with water to reset the twist on it, to get that right back to the way that it should, and dried it. And then once it was dried, I had found a sweater pattern that I thought would work better for the yarn. It's much more of the right gauge yarn for it. So it wasn't really, I wasn't pushing a square peg into a round hole sort of thing. And so it's the Solandra sweater, and the designer's name on Ravelry, or the designer's username on Ravelry is Kayen itee, and I'll link this pattern below, but it is knit from the bottom up, and the sleeves are, I finished both sleeves so far. It's got this lovely leaf pattern that sort of undulates in the sweater, and it's knit from the bottom up. So I decided, I often will start with the sleeves. I feel like it keeps you from getting to that sleeve island, or, you know, by the time you knit the body, you already are all ready to zoom on up to finish the sweater. So I really enjoy getting the sleeves done before I do the body of the sweater. So this way here, they're already like out of the way. My sleeves, I'm pretty tall, so my arms are fairly long, and like the sleeves will take forever if it's the end of the sweater, but somehow at the beginning of the sweater, when I've got all that mojo and steam, it doesn't seem to feel quite as long. And so this is the yarn. I lost the tag of the yarn long ago. I believe that the dyer of this yarn is someone local to the Hudson Valley, if I'm remembering that correctly, and it was it came in really big skeins, and I know there's a really famous person who dyes in those huge skeins, and it's not her yarn, but it was somebody else who dyed in those huge skeins. So I want to say that each skein was maybe 600 yards of worsted weight, and so I have about 1,200 yards in total of this worsted weight yarn, and it's worsted on the edge of Aran. It's like it's a nice weight yarn, and I did make the swatch, and then I washed it and blocked it, made sure it's going to be the correct size. There are very few people who have knit this on Ravelry, so it's hard to say. I think there's the designer and maybe one other person's finished product on Ravelry for me to see. So I really should check Instagram as well and see if anybody posted pictures on there. But I really was looking for something with somewhat of a lacy pattern, a more open drapey look to it, and this sort of fit the bill. So on to the rest of the sweater, hopefully. And with any luck, maybe I can wear this to this year's Rhinebeck as like a little, watch, it'll be 80 degrees, but maybe I can finish this and get to wear it to this year's this year's Rhinebeck. Okay, and the next thing, I figured, with it being summer, I've been very into socks again, and having sort of that portable project. We've been away a lot, and we go out often with the kids to the pool and things, and so it just seems like socks have come back in, something that I knit a lot of and then don't knit a lot of, on and off again. They're on again. So this time I cast on the Rumple socks. Again, it's a pattern by Kay Jones of the Bakery Bears. And this is oh, that came out okay. It's a textured pattern. I don't know that texture is the right word for it, but it's a sort of a combination of ribbing and garter sections that give it a nice patterning to it. And I had this yarn, I went sort of shopping in my stash, and this is from a very old it was a club that I think it was maybe around 2013. I belonged to this fiber club where you got a skein of yarn maybe every month for 4 or 6 months. And the dyer, I went on Etsy to try to figure out what this yarn was, because there wasn't a label on it. And it doesn't look like they're dyeing yarn anymore, but it was, let's see, Knit and Fiber Creation. And it was a club that she did way back when. And I've had it in there, and I liked the look of the yarn, but I could never think of something to use it for. So I decided to stick with the Bakery Bears pattern and move on from the Scrappy Quilt socks to the Rumple socks. And I'm loving it. I have this stitch marker row counter. I bought this years ago, and each little stitch marker has a number associated with it. So as you move down the pattern, you can move to the next number, and it keeps track of where you are on the chart. And I also did something kind of fun. I'm going to show the chart, but just the back of the chart. So what I did is, because it is just a little more difficult than just remembering, you know, knit 2, purl 2 kind of thing. And so I printed out the chart on this cardstock paper, and then I found from my paper supplies that I had this little tool from that knocks the corners off. And so I took the pattern, printed it out, and then knocked off the corners so that it won't be sharp or catch, and then it sits right in my knitting bag, which I thought was so convenient and cute. So this way here I have my pattern with me wherever I go, and I don't have to keep opening my phone up, looking at the pattern, closing my phone, especially when you've got, like, you know, you're out somewhere and you don't want to be like constantly like grabbing your phone, looking at it. It's a lot easier to just have the pattern to reference. So, so that's my next cast on. And then the final thing that I have cast on this month is another pair of sort of basic vanilla socks. These are in a neat yarn that I found at while I was on vacation with my family. We visited Abacan Fabrics in they have more than one location. We went to the one in Wales, and this is a King Cole yarn, and it's got this almost like boucle like feeling to it, like a fuzzy feel to it, and it's called Drifter 4-ply. And so the colorway on this one is rose, which is pretty much accurate. It's like a pink, a rosy pink color. So and so I've just started these, but again, these are like really easy to just pick up and put down as you can, you know, just a row here, a row there. And then also this month I have been doing some more sewing, and it really started when we got home from England. I had the first project that I had in mind, or that I did this month, was something that we saw when we were there. So while we were there, we went to several garden centers and a few different shops, and at all of the places I kept seeing these door stoppers. Like, they have all different door stoppers there. I don't think I've ever seen a door stopper in a store around me ever. And so they had them in different shapes. Some of them were cool animal shapes, and other ones, there were a lot of them that were just this sort of basic squared shape. And I really liked them, but the idea of bringing home a heavy door stopper in my checked baggage was not really something I could do. I didn't have that kind of weight available to me. So what I did instead is, when we were visiting Abacan, I bought a remnant of fabric, and I recreated the door stopper that I had seen in so many places. And I actually took pictures of them in the store so that when I got home, I'd be able to like try to figure it out. And while we were in the store, I definitely picked it up and was like looking to see where seams were, whether they seamed all of the sides or whether it was just one seam for the side. And so I tried to recreate it, and it came out pretty cute. I fancy cut the chickens for the top and the bottom, and then I also picked which of the chickens would be shown on the sides of this to try and like pick out like my kids and I looked at the chickens to say which one was our favorite and to try and get as much of our favorite chickens as we could in the cushion itself. So this guy here was definitely a favorite of mine, and I think my daughter liked this one, and then I think maybe my son liked this one, but or maybe it was, yeah, I'm not sure. And then for the top, it's just a simple handle, and then inside it, it's polyfill to fill most of it up. And then in the bottom, I sewed a little bag, a little weighted bag that I filled with washed and cleaned gravel that we had on hand to weight it down. And I use this. We have a door to our bedroom that we need to keep propped open all the time to allow the cats to come in and out because their food is kept in the master bathroom, because the dog eats their food if we don't keep it in the master bathroom. And so the dog doesn't have access to the upstairs, and that keeps the cat's food from being dog food. And this keeps the cats able to get their food all the time. So I think it came out quite cute, and it saved me having to check the bag. And also I got this as a remnant, as I said, so I got a pretty big piece of fabric for maybe 5 or 6 pounds, and this just used a little piece of it. So I definitely have more fabric that I can use for another project down the line. So I thought this was a fun thing to make. The next thing that I have been sewing this month, or been up to this month, is sewing. And this is sort of the Bakery Bears Makes podcast for me. I've been participating in the Bakery Bears Summer of Stitching, and this is the Pride and Prejudice, or the Jane Austen slow stitched bag that the Bakery Bears have been having tutorials for their patrons, Patreon members over on their Patreon account. And the project itself is a slow stitched bag that you then machine piece together. However, I have young-ish children and not a lot of time to slow stitch, and so I decided to machine stitch it so that I could get this done sometime over the summer. And I used, these are all little bits of fabric from other projects, and it's kind of fun to look at it because some of these are quilts. So this is a quilt for myself, and this pack I used to, that dog's thinking about barking. This is from a pack that I used for a different project, and a quilt that I made my niece when she graduated high school. And so there's lots of different pieces in there. And then I just used some leftover fabric for the tops and bottoms. And the cording itself, in their pattern, they call for thin lace to be used. But I used some leftover pieces from macrame hangings that I've made. And when you make the macrame hangings, you get to the end and you have extra bits that you cut off. And I had saved all of those bits. And I had a couple pieces that were just long enough to make the cord for this one. And I think it came out really cute. I love the colors. It's not necessarily Austen themed colors. It's much more modern in its vibrant and hot pink appearance, but I do love it. I think it's so fun. And yeah, that's pretty much it on this bag. And then the last thing that I sewed this month, while my family and I were visiting the UK, we visited the Quarry Bank Mill, which is a National Trust property right near the Manchester airport. And the Quarry Bank Mill has, it was a mill where they processed the cotton, and then eventually they had the looms to weave the cotton as well. And they still do weaving demos, and they make their own fabric there, which they then print, and they sell this over in the gift shop, souvenir shop as well. And so while we were visiting the mill, which was absolutely amazing, the mill itself was really interesting. It was you could go floor by floor and find sort of the history of the mill and sort of effect of the workers who worked in the mill. It was really a really great educational visit for both my family, my kids, as well as myself. And then the fabric that I picked up in the gift shop is this fabric here. So they wove it in the mill and then they printed it, which I thought is really cool. And I have chickens. We have 8 hens, or 8 chickens outside, 7 hens and a rooster. And so I thought that this was really appropriate fabric for me. And so I used sort of the same logic to make this bag that I did with the Bakery Bears bag, only I changed the dimensions a little bit to make it a little roomier, because this one I intended to put, right now I have the sweater that I'm knitting, the components to the sweater, and it's pretty big. I could probably get most of a sweater in here. And then for the bottom and the tie channels, yeah, that's what it's called, the drawstring channels, I found remnants of a fabric that I used for a different project. This is actually more like, this is fabric for apparel. It was fabric that I used to make a dress, and I thought that that matched perfectly with the fabric from the Quarry Bank Mill, and so I matched those together. And again, I used remnants from a macrame project for the drawstring pulls. And actually, when I purchased the macrame kit to make the hangings, the hanging macrame plant, they're plant hangers. So I have several house plants that I wanted to have hung in my house so that the cat couldn't eat them. And so I made the macrame, and the kit that I got it with came with these little wooden balls. And so I included them. I guess they're more like wooden beads than balls, but either way, I included them on this bag, and I thought that it made a nice effect on there to have the wooden balls. So wooden beads, boy, talking today is difficult. I'm gonna pause it right here because the dog is gonna bark. I'm back. So I feel like I should apologize a little bit today because this is gonna be a slightly choppier video. I have everybody home in the house with me today, and so there's been a little bit of noise in the background that I've had to attend to. The dog is definitely wanting to bark at the neighbors, and my son needed some help opening one of his snack wrappers. So life has just been going on while I've been trying to film this video. I am going to include at the end, I have lots of video of me making this door stopper, and so I'll include that at the end. And then I also have some footage. What do I have footage of? I don't know. I don't know what I have footage of, but whatever it is that I have extra footage of from this month, I will include it in there. Oh, I know what it is. I have, I talked a little bit about, or a lot of it, about the process of taking the sweater yarn from the Whitmore and getting it back to a knittable state. And so I have some footage of that, of me sort of winding it up, knotting it, and then dipping it in the water. And it's really a great transformation when it goes from that kinky skein to you know, sort of a fresh, brand new looking skein of yarn after you wash and dry it. So I'll include that at the end as well. And I think that's about it. So thank you so much for joining me and for sharing all the things that I made in the month of July. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to sharing everything that that I get up to in the month of August. Thanks.